Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. My name is Dave Malouf. I'm one of the organizers of the Design Ops New York City or NYC meetup. Thank you all for coming. How many of you all, is this your first Design Ops meetup in New York? All right, let's ask that the other way. How many of you are returning? All right, thank you all for coming back. Next question I have is, how many of you are more research related in your positions in some way? How many of you are more design related? How many of you just don't care what you're related to? All right, cool. So tonight we're going to be talking about scaling research across an organization. Can't do design without research. And so that's why it's here as part of the design ops, research ops are conjoined twins, if you will. The design ops meetup, we try to do once a month, depending on host availability and content availability. We do this all on support of organizations and volunteers. I'd like to introduce Michelle Chu, who's the other organizer of the meetup. And so an event like this takes place when someone raises their hand and says, I would like to host. And another person raises their hand and says, I have an idea for content. And maybe that's them speaking, maybe that's them creating a panel, something, right? In this case, one person raised both of their hands, but it doesn't have to be that way. It does make my life a lot easier if it does happen that way. But I'm putting that out there in case anyone of you in the stands here have an idea that you think is relevant to this community, which is pretty broad when you think about that design ops can still pretty much mean anything that we want it to, and that we're in this definitional phase of maturing a practice. So if you have ideas for content, great. If you have an organization that can hold 50 or more people, great. If you have an organization that can hold 50 or more people and can cater, better. And even if catering just meant like chips and beer, that's the bar that you can start at. Pizza and beer is the next level up, and then this, awesomeness, right? So in terms of awesomeness, I really want to thank the folks at jpmorgan Chase Bank, and in particular, the person with two arms who stood up, Jose Coronado. This is his second time sticking up his hands since we've existed. And Jose is Director of Design Operations at the CIB side, which is the corporate banking side, corporate and institutional banking side of JP Morgan. And I will let him take the rest of the show away. Thank you very much. And I'll be back when this is all over with a few more housekeeping stuff. So, bye.
Thank you, Dave. And thank you, everybody, for being here. This event, as Dave mentioned, is not possible without the community coming together. So I'm just going to make a quick overview of the bank. You might have seen some of the logos. Probably the most visible is Chase. My team sits in the institutional side. And as you can see, it's not just a straight line. We cross different lines of business. I think before we start, basically, I want to share the stories of the two teams that are represented in the panel from the bank side. The first one is Digital Consumer Experience. That's DCE, which sits within Chase, but it really does JP Morgan Chase work across different lines of business. It's a group of about 375 designers and researchers and content generators or content creators that are very passionate about making sure that we work on applications that deliver value to the people and help them manage their financial health. The other team that's represented here is the Corporate Investment Bank Digital Experience Design team. And basically, we are an international team that spans across 6 different cities and about 130 people. We have product designers, content strategy, content service design and research, among other functions in the team. And I am building the design operations team for the practice. I think while our teams are separate, we share a passion and we share a belief that it is very important for us to partner with product and technology and other areas of the organization like operations to basically uncover the customer needs across the JPMorgan Chase ecosystem and create solutions that deliver the best experience possible for our clients, for our customers, and for our business as a whole. So that's it about the introduction. I think the last part, and this is a plug, but it's a plug for all of us here in the panel. We are all hiring. So if you're looking for a job, make sure that you approach one of us or look for people in the audience who are from any of our organizations. Okay, so let's get to business. Welcome. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. So Megan, let's start with you. Very brief introduction about you and your role in McKinsey.
Okay. So as Jose mentioned, I work at McKinsey, which, if you aren't familiar, is a large management consulting firm. And what I do there is I lead a team called Product Insights, which sits within our design organization. And we are responsible for the qualitative and quantitative user research that informs all of the products that we buy or build for use at the firm. So everything from McKinsey.com, which you might be familiar with, to knowledge management is a really big thing for us, obviously, but also super sexy stuff like expense software and timesheets and all that. So it's really the gamut of what makes the firm tick. And I've been there for about 15 years and worn many different hats. This is my latest incarnation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Natalie?
My name is Natalie Connors. I lead the research team at JPMorgan Chase for digital wealth management. So we take care of the private bank, international private bank, and anything that's investment related on the Chase side. So we have very, very specific design and research ops challenges, namely trying to get in front of really, really rich people who don't have a lot of time. So yeah, I've been here for almost 3 years, and it's a great place. You should come and work with us.
No, you should come work for us.
Us.
No competition here. Dana?
Hi, I'm Dana Crisfield. I'm a UX researcher at Etsy. I've been building technology for most of my career and have spent most of that time trying to find different ways to understand the people that we are imposing our technology upon. I've remained pretty passionate about what research can do beyond just broadening our understanding of our users. I think research has the power to actually bring us together to collaborate across our skill sets and across our business lines, and to open up our thinking and let us kind of reconsider some of our opinions and our perspectives and our biases, and maybe even change our minds if the evidence is strong enough. And I think that is kind of magical, and it's actually what research makes possible.
Thank you. Joseph?
Joseph Kramer. So I work in the CIB in JPMorgan Chase. So we talked about JPMorgan before and the connections between the different parts of the organization. I head the user research team, which is a relatively new team. We're about 2 years old. We're spread across 3 different locations, one being New York, London, and Bournemouth. So it's a team which is spread across, spread thinly, but across a couple of locations. And the best challenge we have is going to our stakeholders and convincing them that we really need to do user research, because they say, well, we talk to our customers as well. We ask them, what do you want? So that's our big challenge. But we've been making great strides and doing a lot of work, and we'll have a chance to talk about some of the things we've been doing.
Great, thank you. Michelle?
Hi, my name is Michelle Marrett. I'm the lead UX researcher at CBRE, and particularly in a group called Build. This is an innovative group. They were purchased by CBRE about 2 years ago. The former name was Floored. And so we have a unique challenge that we're doing. So we're creating actually digital products, some of which are 2D and 3D things like what you would see for like gaming, except we're doing it for commercial real estate. So large office buildings, maybe multifamily housing, some things at Houston, at I guess Hudson Yards. But we also have similar challenges in that some of our work is not as sexy. It's IT software, making sure brokers get paid, and brokers don't always have a lot of time to talk to you. So we're balancing that. One thing I wanted to make sure to emphasize is we're actually worldwide. So some of the offices and our challenges are making sure that people in New York City, Seattle, Dallas, London, even we met with someone in Hong Kong, when we do talk to users, that we're actually sharing insights and everything across all those channels, like really what is different in EMEA or Asia, but at the same time, like, can we align on common frameworks?
Great, thank you. So I hope that gave you a sense of who the people in the panel are. So Megan, I want to start with you, and we worked together for about 2 years, so I have some insider perspective on Megan's work. And when we were preparing the panel, we were talking about your Scrappy approach concept. And what struck me as interesting, if you can talk a little bit about that, but you wanted to make emphasis on sharing with the people in the audience, you know, getting serious from Scrappy to serious. So can you touch upon a little bit on what you're doing? What are the challenges you're facing today?
Absolutely. So yeah, when our team, the design team itself, formed about 5 years ago. Before that, there was no formal design function in the enterprise IT organization at McKinsey. So you can imagine it's about a 2,000-person IT organization, about 5 to 10 designers and researchers scattered throughout. So there were 3 of us on the team when it started, a designer, a researcher, and a director of design. And my job as the lone official researcher in the entire organization was to figure out how to be everywhere at once. Obviously impossible, especially in a global organization. So what I tried to do was think about, okay, we have a bunch of product managers. I don't have designers, I don't have researchers, but I have PMs, I have tech leads, I have interest, and I have appetite. So how do I teach these people how to do the basics on their own, you know, so that they can at least do some things and get a little bit better quickly? So we really focused in that first year or two, obviously on recruiting, but also on, you know, identifying the best practices for research in our organization. We're, you know, similar. We have similar kind of user, not same, but kind of the same idea of like our users are scattered. They're incredibly busy. They really want to give back, but they can't really make time for us. So how do we get them? How do we do things remotely? And then think about, okay, how do I codify those best practices and make them shareable? How do I teach people how to employ them, and how do I coach them through that? And then how do I staff the very few people that I do have to the most visible and important work so that I can really prove the value of what it is that we do, right? So make sure that those examples really shine to sort of build the case for more people. And so we talked about the meaning of Scrappy, and to me, Scrappy is not necessarily messy or disorganized, but more doing the most that you can with the little scraps that you have, so sort of scraping it together into something meaningful. And that's really what we tried to do. So we have a happy ending, or a happy next chapter, which is that we're now at about 100 designers, researchers, data analysts, data scientists globally. We have people in Gurgaon, Prague, New York, Waltham. I think that's it. And we are, you know, adding another probably 30 people in the next few months. So now, as that happens and as we scale, there was a time when I could literally tell you every piece of research that we'd done, every insight we'd uncovered. I could tell you who to talk to, what it meant, where it was. That is definitely no longer the case. So we're really looking at now, you know, fit-for-purpose tools, things that can help us manage research and create transparency. We're really trying to be lean and agile, bring our PMs and tech folks into the process. And then also just as we grow, how do we continue to develop our best practices and instill those? So we're looking at building up a COE with dedicated staff who will literally, you know, sort of see what's happening inside and outside and really disseminate those best practices throughout. So we're starting to get much more operationally formal, but we are continuing to do that with a spirit of experimentation. So always the sort of first, easiest, smallest thing we can do to prove value. Yeah, so keeping the kind of scrappy spirit while we actually have budget and headcount, and it is very exciting. So that's sort of the story of how we did that at McKinsey.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, I appreciate some of the insights since I was in the middle of some of those.
Yes.
And seeing the researchers that operated in a manner that they basically consulted with other people. So I think that's kind of a good segue to talk to Natalie about you know, some of the challenges that you're facing as you are partnering across different areas of the organization to upscale the impact of design. And I would love to for you to share you know, your perspective of that and some of the challenges that you're facing as you're doing that in your area of work.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, this topic it's super real for us right now. We are being asked to scale. You know, you get questions asked about what is the optimal ratio of researchers to designers. Like, there's too many researchers, and us saying, well, we need to do foundational research first because you guys don't know where you're going. So it's that kind of like that kind of tension between us as in the design world and the business. And so one of the things that I have kind of realized is that a lot of the time as researchers, we think, as UX researchers, we have the feeling that we are the ones who are doing the real research. And while there may be other people in the organization who may also be bringing in customer insights, we kind of tend to isolate ourselves. And it's completely natural, right? Like, you might have marketing teams that have different approaches. You might have analytics teams that look at the perspective from a different place. We have business intelligence teams. You have digital strategy teams that are doing their own research. You have product managers who are doing their own research and asking leading questions. And you kind of like, everyone's research is good, right? It's just at different levels of maturity. So you heard my talk on Saturday, like, we're kind of talking about that, like, how do you reach out to these different partners and make sure that you are kind of working to, you have the same language, that you share the same tools, that you're not kind of breaking the world up into like qual and quant. And you guys do quant and we do qual, and you guys do metrics and analytics and we don't. And I think at some point, you have to come together. We have made many attempts at this with different groups. The most successful thing that we've done is we've set up monthly meetings with all of the different teams who are interested in a single topic to say, this is the research that's coming up. You're more than welcome to come to try and find synergies in a very tactical way. The second thing we tried to do was to try and understand customer segments and personas and how they relate to one another so that we're all talking about the same thing, so that we are not talking about archetypes and they're talking about personas. So it's like we have a persona, for example, called Nervous Ned, and then we have like an archetype called the starter. And they're basically the same person, and it doesn't matter if you're talking about the starter or Nervous Ned, but we have to actually say that and agree that they are the same thing, because otherwise product gets confused. Like all of our other partners who we're meant to serve actually get really confused and don't know who to ask for stuff. The other thing that we've done is we've made up a list of the things that each organization's remit is about. So for example, if a product manager comes to us and they ask us to figure out what price we should charge for something, we say, no, that's market research. You need to go to them. If they come to us and ask for some sort of modeling with like business intelligence, we're like, no, you go to business intelligence. And we have to break people out of the habit of going to the single place for everything. And usually that sort of occurs because of the cost, like the way that the cost is allocated. So for a product manager to come to us, it's free, but for them to go to market research, it's expensive. So they're going to try and come to us anyway. And so they kind of start breaking the model, and that's where you get all the confusion. So lots of tactical learnings. We're not there by any means. But the last thing I think that has really been a surprise to me, and that has been a benefit of our outreach to these other consumer insights places, organizations, is that our researchers have started to see career progression into these areas. So in the beginning, it was kind of like all the researchers just taking their research manager's job. Like, that's what they want. They want to get promoted. They want to go associate VP. That's all they want. But now they're starting to kind of see that maybe, you know, I kind of like this analytics space. I'm going to try and learn. I'm going to partner with with my analytics team on some projects. And maybe my next move is to analytics, and to kind of broaden that and make that like a reality or a possibility for our researchers. I think that's been the biggest draw card of our approach to try and partner with other customer insights groups.
That's great, and I imagine some of you in the panel also have some challenges with resource allocation and who pays for what,
Yes.
especially you know, how do we get additional headcount? So that's very good. Thank you for sharing that. Dana, totally different perspective that you bring to the table, and that's why I love your topic. But I want you to share with us your experience with scaling research via what you call user research speed dating.
Yes.
Totally different perspective. So.
Sure. So at an internet company, user research is really kind of part of the DNA of the company. So we don't really struggle to get buy-in or sell the value of research. Everyone is ready to jump in. Speed dating style research in groups is how I like to refer to it, which is not really a sexy title. But, I didn't invent it. There are actually a lot of companies that are doing this, and it was happening at Etsy before I got there. But from the title, you can kind of guess how it works. We bring in a set of users, usually about 6, and the same number of product teams are ready to talk to them. So each product team comes up with what it's going to engage with the users about, and that might be a prototype and getting some feedback on that, or doing an activity like a card sort, or maybe just asking a few questions about how a feature is currently being used. So the product team engages with one user for about 20 to 25 minutes. We keep it nice and small. And then when the buzzer goes off, all the users pop up and move to the next team. So within the course of 2 hours, all of the teams have actually talked to 6 different people. The format makes it really easy for the entire product team to join in. So an entire product team from the broad standpoint. So not only our product manager and designers and engineers, but also like marketing people can jump in, folks from support. There's lots of space there, and people take on different roles. So somebody needs to moderate and somebody needs to take notes and the other ones observe, but with each session we can actually sort of switch those around, which lets people try out moderating if they want to, and it allows them to sort of come and go and spend as much time there or just show up for one session. I think the power of the approach is really in allowing the teams to connect directly with users and in shrinking the amount of time that it takes for us to get from data collection to sort of making sense of that, to getting to our insights and sharing those, because by the end of a single day, any of the people who were participating could actually produce a couple of slides that say what we learned and what we're going to do with that. We usually take some time after that, right after the session, to do synthesis, so the whole team gets together. And we talk about what we learned, what was surprising, which of our assumptions are lying in the dust and which are still standing. If there are any things, if we gained confidence enough in anything that we'll actually take action on that next, and then what are the other things that we want to look into down the line using different methods. So it's a nice, fast method, and it works well. It's never the only touch point, right, that we have for a particular research question. It works really well as part of a set of methods, and it works really well as the first one that we do, because the whole team is coming together. We've heard generally from customers, and then we can take a second and have a conversation about, okay, what did that mean, and where do we want to take that next? So it's a nice launching point to the rest of the research. When I was preparing for this session, I looked around on the interwebs to see who else was doing it, and there are a lot of people actually out there writing about it. But somebody had called it quick, lightweight sessions to get fast feedback. So that was a really nice, concise way to say what I just said.
That's great.
Yes.
How often do you do that?
It's actually twice a month, once for buyers and once for sellers. Those are the
That's great.
two Etsy customer groups.
So if you're in a consumer-oriented organization, you probably can be, more amicable to that type of approach.
Yeah.
I guess for Natalie with wealthy clients, maybe that's not so doable, but it is a very interesting approach. Thanks for sharing that story.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the biggest challenges that we have when we approach traditional research was the 6 to 8 week turnaround time. And what you're describing is basically a couple of days.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that doesn't mean that there's no planning ahead.
Yeah, but the planning is often very fast. The email goes out, all the teams have to sign up, and if not enough sign up, we don't get to have the pilot, so everybody sort of gets their acts together very, very quickly.
The power, yeah, go ahead, Michelle, please.
When I was at Intuit, they did something similar where they pre-recruited, like, I guess the same type of user, and then different teams might say, I only need a half hour, I need a whole hour, but they would bring them in, and then the same thing, like the sign-up slot, and then it was awesome. That way whatever you needed to do, you could get in front of a user within days, usually.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that story. Joseph, when we were preparing, you mentioned repeatable processes. What can we automate? What can we prepare to save time? Obviously, from a different perspective than what Dana mentioned. I would call it, what can we operationalize? So what can you share with us about what work you're doing with your team and with the organization?
And as I mentioned before in the intro, we've grown over the last 2 years from 0 or from 1 to about 8 at the moment. But we're facing off a team of approximately another 110 people who are a mix of designers and interaction folks. So we have a pretty large base that we're trying to service. And at the same time, we're servicing also the product owners on the other side. So with 8 people, we have to do something to operationalize the work we're doing to make it broader scale. Yes, we would love to hire a whole lot of people, and hopefully we'll find some more of you in the audience. But it's a tough job finding the right people, finding them, especially in New York. There's a lot of opportunities out there. And so finding the right people is a hard slog. And so we wanted to make sure we could operationalize what it is we were doing. And so we've actually gone about it in 5 different ways that I'll share with you tonight. One of the first ways we tried to operationalize it was with developing templates. We developed a variety of templates, and we really saw 2 ways that templates were helping us scale. Templates helped, first of all, make sure we weren't having to rediscover every time a user researcher in the team was doing a job. They could go to a place and say, oh, usability test findings, here's a deck which basically lays out a way for me to describe the findings that I have. I don't have to start creating a new deck for myself every time. And so you've got an efficiency play over there. So that was one way we were operationalizing, was improving the efficiency of the folks on the team, that they could concentrate on value-added work as opposed to not such value-added work. And so an example of that, as I said, test findings or personas, which I'll get back to in a second, or service blueprints. So all of those were a way we could make sure we're collecting data in a uniform way, and we're not wasting time. We're being efficient about doing that. But another way that templates helped us was actually enabling other teams, others who may not be user researchers themselves, and maybe designers or interaction folks, to be able to do some of the things themselves. So for example, we recently introduced heuristic evaluations. We created a template with a how-to guide on how to run a heuristic evaluation, and it's basically self-serve. You can read the instructions, you can print off some heuristic evaluation posters. If you want to do it as a team and put it around the room, there's some sheets you can use, and so it's really self-serve. And in fact, to my surprise, a couple of people actually did self-serve and go and do it. And I found out only after they'd finished doing it. They said, oh, by the way, we tried out heuristic evaluation. It really worked well. So that was great. So that was one way we were trying to scale, was really around templates. Another way we've been scaling is actually trying to institute some processes in what we do. So trying to put some processes, and I'll give you an example of one in a minute, was a way of helping make sure we're getting the same uniform way things are being done, and make sure we're doing the right type of work. So for example, it may seem so obvious, but it really was a help, creating a user research brief. So we created a brief which has some very common things. What is the problem you're trying to address? How do you know it's a problem? How are you going to measure success if this problem was dealt with? Do you have a budget to go after this problem? So rather than just people saying, well, I have a problem, can you please help me? And then they have no budget afterwards, and so therefore it's not really important to them. If they have a budget behind it, then it's likely to be important. Are we guaranteed that what we will do for the work will actually have an impact? That's another simple way of sort of making sure we're taking up work which is going to have an impact. And if we have a template for this, like I said, templates, we have a template for it, we fill it out. On every person who approaches us to do a project, we're able to go back to the project team who's coming in with the request and say, okay, we filled this out, is this correct? Are we on board? So that's a way, putting some processes like that in place, or a test plan document. Somebody comes to us and says they want to do a test. Well, we're going to fill out this test plan document. Are you sure you know who your users are? Do you have a prototype for testing or something else for testing? Well, yeah, we're still 2 months off. Okay, now we know not to waste our time. Do we have scenarios that we want to test? Do they make sense? Are you able to support those scenarios in the prototype? We recently spent quite a while with someone who had a prototype, but they never thought of what scenarios might be through the prototype. And adapting the prototype to make those scenarios was a fairly significant chunk of work. So again, putting these processes in place really makes sure we're more efficient, more effective, hence scaling. We developed a bunch of how-to guides, from things as simple as how should you conduct an interview? Don't ask leading questions.
Please don't.
Joseph, I'm going to, I've seen Megan nod her head a lot because
Vigorously, yeah.
a Scrappy approach, that's
similar.
basically how you started. Can you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, essentially, I started it by calling it a set of best practices, but what it really evolved into was a playbook for how we approach research and design. So it still lives on Box, but it will someday evolve. But it's organized by product development lifecycle phase. So, discovery, test and learn, delivery, and launch and listen is what we call it. And it is exactly that. It's sort of for each phase, here's what you should be focusing on. Here's how you know when you're ready to move on. Here's a series of activities you could do. Here are the things you should be learning or achieving as part of this phase. And then here's all these methods, how-tos accompanied by templates in the things that we use, right? So Miraboard, Box, PowerPoint, it's McKinsey, Sketch, Envision, and here are all the things you could use to execute that work. And here's how you plan for that work. And yeah, it's exactly the same thing. And it's been hugely helpful. As we grew, we actually started to use it as a way to onboard our designers and researchers and say, this is how we practice, this is our philosophy, this is our approach, this is what we found works well with consultants who think they know everything. I was like, there must not be McKinsey people in this audience. You would have laughed harder. But, and so that's been a really great way to communicate, not just, here's how you can do this, product manager, but also here's what we believe, here's who we are, and here's how we practice our craft.
Yeah, and I think I see a trend between all of you to wrap up in the next point with Joseph, but it is maximize the use of your time.
Yes.
If you go to a meeting and the people that you're trying to help are not prepared, that makes you waste your time, and your time with so few resources is so valuable.
And also, every time you do something and it works really well, turn it into a template, right? So if you do an amazing workshop where you're helping a team define the problem they're trying to solve, think about what made it amazing and try to templatize it so that it can scale. Just try to scale everything you do.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Joseph.
Well, I'll pick up on one of the points you made before. You said in the early days, I knew every single piece of research which was going on. I could direct you. We started off with trying to build a library. I haven't found the right library software out there to really do a good job. We're pretty scrappy on that one. But at least we have a way of searching through the artifacts which are being created. We still have to do a lot of work at convincing people to make sure they put their artifacts into the library. That remains a challenge. But having a search, having a library, being able to say what are the different types of things in the library. And in fact, we've tried to do two things with the library is put completed artifacts in the library and also put things in the library which you actually are willing to allow people to edit. So for example, we created a persona type of template, and we amended the persona template by putting a degree of confidence against different parts of that persona. And what that allows people to do is to say, here's what I think is some of the goals of this persona, or here are some of the things which I think are important for this persona, but I'm not actually sure. I have 25% degree of confidence in this, which is great because the next person who picks up the persona can look at it and say, well, actually, I just heard a bunch of information which leads me to believe that this is correct, and I can up the confidence on it. So we actually can allow people to iterate on the personas on artifacts in the library. So I'll stop on the library. I have a couple of other things that we can talk later as the panel evolves.
Thank you. And I appreciate because I see the heads nodding, hypothesis validation, and formulating some things that might not be proven yet, but if you do some research, then you can upgrade that. And Michelle, as you mentioned in your introduction, I think I was one of those people who CBRE, they're just a real estate company. What do they have researchers for? But what caught my attention when we were preparing for the panel was your perspective on we're not only a strong group of researchers and designers doing very cool digital stuff, but we have to scale internationally.
Yeah.
So why don't you share some of your challenges and lessons learned in your journey?
Okay, so we are trying to actually build a user research center of excellence that does scale cities, geographies, continents, if possible. And this makes it unique because it's not about reporting structures or teams. Our goal and vision is actually to provide the right insights and infrastructure for any team so that they can build the right thing. And once they decide what that right thing is, that they can build it right. So really helping people to inform them with, like, again, all the templates, all things like that. Are you doing discovery research? Are you doing generative research? What is your overall maybe like jobs to be done framework, whatever that is? How are you going to narrow down? But then what are some really simple usability templates, heuristic reviews, of course, all things like that. What was unique was I was in New York. I was the first full-time researcher hired in New York. We had a half-time person who had been converted from, I think, customer success, who started doing research. So yay for customer success because they're very close to the customers. And so we started last November. I was able to meet with colleagues who are in Seattle and Dallas, and we started kind of an organic, let's just have a monthly meetup of researchers and people who are doing research. And we found designers, we found some product managers, and what was funny is this kind of informal meetup became like a thing, and we continued it once a month. In May, we were able to hire another full-time researcher in New York City. Hi, Kathy. My colleague hired someone else in Seattle. And we started also getting contacted from people in London and Hong Kong and other places, and they started hearing, well, you have this researcher meetup, and we started to track informally what frameworks have you done? Have you done personas? We created a wiki, like a very basic Google Docs wiki, nothing fancy, just to say what personas exist, what research plans have been used, where is it for all these different things. And then we've also started to try to create user research job families, which starts to go to, I think, the point of like, if you really want to have maybe critical research done, you're going to want a dedicated user researcher. Here's what that person can provide. But then also, here's what, again, how do we enable the people who do research to do that? And then having frameworks, having big journey maps, anything like that, that enables a PM or somebody else to say, oh, we just have to start here. Here's our scenario. We just have to take this and dive deep. So that's where we're at.
That's great. What is one of the biggest challenges that, or what are some of the biggest challenges that you're encountering?
So the biggest challenge is, as we said, we're huge. We're all over the world. We're finding that a lot of people were talking to the same users. There's a funny thing where, again, we started working in New York City, interviewing again brokers and everybody that could be all over the U.S. Certainly, maybe Latin America. That we started recruiting. Some of our colleagues had challenges recruiting there. Turns out people in Seattle were actually talking to the same users. So we were saying, okay, just among these two cities, we might be trying to recruit the same people. We found out Dallas and other places. So our biggest challenge is simply right now tracking the people and trying to build a actionable participant management system, because our ideal vision is, okay, that's great that you talk to somebody in Atlanta, but how do I know that if someone else wants to talk to them, that they're not going to start from scratch? They're not, again, these people, a lot of them are brokers, commercial real estate. If you talk to them, they tell you how much time they're wasting. So you really don't want to be talking to the same people unless it's very intentional in that sense. And then we have external participants, because some of the people are actually tenants in the building. They're trying to remodel their space. They're using some of our visualization tools, trying to get an understanding. And so we're using things like Respondent.io, userinterviews.com, so that we have actually, we have templates for screeners so that a PM can go in and just say, okay, this is the same person I want, reuse the screener. And that worked really, really well. And that's been awesome, but that's a challenge.
That's great. By what you describe, and this last question, it's a fully distributed team, so you are not centralized, or you don't have a head of.
So we're all, and that's why it's unique. Like, there are all these UX teams. We report into a UX director. There are various UX directors, associate directors, or even just there's this, like, I think one PM in like Hong Kong who's trying to start up the entire UX group over there. And so it's more that there's this informal, that's why we're saying it's a user research center of excellence. It's not, it's crossing reporting structures and boundaries.
That's great. And I want to make sure we have enough time to get questions from the audience. But I want to present a question across the board, around panels and speed dating. And Megan, I know, you founded a group inside McKinsey to help you with the challenge of how do we get people who are super busy, who know everything there is to know about what you do, and if you give them the wrong tool, they will find a way around it.
Yes.
So
yeah, sure, I can talk about that. So originally we had sort of two groups of people. We had one group called the Regional Technology Councils, which were a really high-touch kind of user panel of about 70 people divided by region. And they really participated in a lot of our foundational research, and they were guinea pigs for a lot of our new research techniques. So can I do participatory design at McKinsey? These are the people that I will try it on and see if they rebel or if they get into it. And mostly they got into it. And so they were sort of a very high touch, almost like advisory panel. And they were incredible, but they were very time consuming, and it has since been disbanded. But we also have this parallel user test bed that started as a group of about 300 consultants and has since grown to about 2,700 firm members globally who are interested in giving back to the firm, interested in having a say in what we call our technology. We call them our technology labs. And so they have raised their hands to say, hey, contact me. I'm interested in research opportunities. So we do the same thing. We create screeners, even though everybody's internal. And the Our Technology Labs team, which is a group of about 5 or 6 designers and researchers now, actually helps their fellow designers and their PMs with their research plans. You can't get through without a plan. So we give feedback on the approach, and then we help kind of screen that group. It's been very successful, but we face some of the same challenges, right, around participant management. It's the biggest thing that our folks want is recognition. And so being able to give them a list at the end of the year of all the things they had impact on and what that did for the firm, and to be able to give that to their evaluator is our goal. It's very hard because we really don't have a great tracking system. So that's something we need to work on. We're also global, so we have to worry about privacy and GDPR for that. And then ultimately, cultivating participation is still a challenge, even with that group. 2,700 people is almost 10% of the firm, almost. And yet we still have trouble. So we're trying to come up, as part of our new COE, we want to establish a participant cultivation and management program that would do more active kind of farming of data to see who isn't staffed to an engagement right now, and can I call them, and will they be likely to pick up? So there's a lot of stuff that we have on the horizon, but that testbed has been huge for us, both in terms of participation, but also in terms of just name brand recognition that we're actually doing research and design at the firm, which is relatively new at a broad scale. So it's been pretty cool.
That's great. Anyone of you are facing or doing something similar to create a customer panel or a group that can help us?
We have pilot testers. So for certain things, several of our products have like pre-approved pilot testers, and we're also doing that.
External or internal?
Both. So depending on the product, and what we're doing is like in one case, we're rolling it out like maybe to 5. In some of these, they're not just brokers; they're brokers and teams that support them, or models like that. So it's like 5 teams. Okay, if that works, we're going to do 5 more teams, and then so on. So we have, and they're essentially pre-recruited. So we're starting to do that, and then kind of set up essentially panels, but they're in a different format.
That's great. Dana or Joseph or Natalie?
We have in JP Morgan groups that are called business resource groups that people can sign up for. They're kind of special interest groups, and they revolve around all sorts of interests. Like there's one on next generation technology, there's a pride one, there's like a Hispanic heritage one, there's a cooking one. So we actually sent out an email to all of those groups and said, look, we need people to test with. You guys are employees, but you also chase customers. So we ended up getting something like 300 responses. We did a survey, we screened them for what products they use, so we know who to reach out to. And that panel was actually specifically built for designers and content strategists and product managers who were doing usability testing. So we had actually rolled out in this kind of scrappy way in trying to scale UX usability boot camp. There was 1.5 days of like teaching people hands-on how to do usability testing, providing all of the templates, all of this stuff. And we felt that it was a bit of a risk to actually put those people who were newly trained in front of customers. So we used this panel as a kind of halfway point, right? For them to practice, for them to get comfortable before we actually, send them out into the wild. But I have a question. Can I ask a question as well of the panel?
Oh, of course.
So I have a problem panel. My big question is around the quality of the research that comes out of these self-service kind of models. Right now, we have our researchers who are doing the work that they're meant to be doing. On top of that, they are facilitating these sort of like designers and non-research in doing research by helping, formulate plans and get people in, and also they are reviewing the work. And it's a lot of work on top of our normal work. Yeah. So how can we do that? Do you guys have any ideas? Have you tackled it? Sorry, that was a surprise
Megan,
question.
I know you have, but I want to see, have you tried something like that?
Well, we essentially kind of hacked an automated usability test by mixing kind of, they're not automated surveys, they're surveys we're doing in like SurveyMonkey, but they're task related. And so we're sending them out to our pilot testers, our beta testers, but then they're interspersed with kind of weekly or bi-weekly check-ins with the product team, and then essentially starting to see, like, we had 19 people start, maybe by the end we only have 10 people, but you're also having these kind of high touch moments. So you're starting to say like, well, they answered this, but did they really do that? And then in the call you're saying, okay, you told me you had this issue, or you told me that, and then they can't show you what it was. So I think we're like kind of doing a mixed method in that sense to validate that, but having the PMs and everybody really appreciated the rigor that we were able to bring in, again, by applying kind of automated usability, task-based things with roadblocks, like submit a screenshot of what you did, send us, use our email as pretend that we're your client. And so I think then you really saw were they doing it. And then of course there's attrition, but also because you had the calls, you're essentially saying, are they real? Are they really doing these things? Yeah.
That's interesting.
Megan?
Oh, I mean, I think some of the stuff you're doing is the stuff I would suggest, right? So the hands-on training. We have a game that I use to train PMs how to do user interviews, where I have a bell and I give it to someone else in the room, and they're supposed to ding it every time the person makes a mistake in the sort of fake interview. Yeah, which is a little mean. And also they ding it when they do something really interesting or good. But that's been really helpful because they're watching each other, and so they're sort of like testing each other and learning. So the sort of, here's how you do it, but then let's actually role play and try it. Yeah. We especially do that with our partners. Are incredibly difficult to interview because they'll get on the phone and they'll be like, yeah, we only have 15 minutes. Here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to do. This is the answer. And so you have to really train people to be comfortable kind of pushing back, allow that 5 minutes of them telling you what to do and all that. So we do a lot of role play and a lot of coaching. I also agree with the sort of automate or delegate the things that are less subjective. So things like usability testing, the things that you can sort of make more quantitative or they don't require as much expertise to do. I think those are the things I try to get the PMs or the engineers to get in on, while also kind of watching other things and apprenticing with the researchers or the experienced designers. So I think what you're doing is great. I don't know that there's any way. I don't know that there's any way other than kind of letting them watch and learn.
Yeah.
And maybe like a shot collar instead of the bell. But I think that's
I call that letting all other people help us help them.
Yeah.
It's hard to get started. But once you begin building that knowledge, then your whole organization, not just your team, starts getting more comfortable with that. And at the beginning, I think one of you mentioned, don't play with my toys approach versus, okay, let's other get into the sandbox. Let's get them get dirty with the toys, and maybe they can help us. And a lot of the times we say, I think Natalie, you mentioned, well, but your research is not perfect. It's not the way we do it, but that separates us instead of bringing us together. Yeah. And so I think we have many opportunities there. Okay, so now let's get the microphones to the public. I'm going to ask Tamara, and if I get Michelle or somebody else to help me out, Matt Karp, if you are still there, that would be great. Oh, there you go. Oh, Michelle got it. You got off the hook. Thank you. So please raise your hand, wait for the microphone to get to you. I think first person right in the middle in front of the camera. Then ask your question, please.
Hi, my name is Sam. Thank you for the talk. It's very interesting. I have a lot of questions. I lead UX research at Equinox, and so I struggle with also similar things like getting in front of members to talk with them and get their feedback. But particularly I struggle with right now is member panel management. So making sure that I'm communicating with the operations team and the marketing team, and that there's this one source of truth where, because there's like Salesforce, and then there's Simon CDP, and then there's my Scrappy spreadsheet, and then I've looked, so I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about what tools you're using and how you're organizing this data, and how are you making sure that the data team is, it's updated in the data team and the marketing team and the ops team across all the teams in the organization.
Well, in the past, I've used a tool called Center Code, and that was really good for beta testing, pilot testing, and it's really nice because it can track your participants over years. You can also see like all the different surveys or activities that they did, and also product teams can go in there and connect. In other cases, we're connecting things with like intercom, so there's a lot of plugins. So I would figure out like what tools work for you, and then but you can like even Qualtrics I think can let you can track different the same participant taking multiple surveys. But if you're doing something like that, maybe invest in one of those tools. So, yeah.
Anybody else?
We're actually using Vision Critical to manage a panel, which has its pros and cons, like any tool. I think. I think what makes it really work well for us, though, is having a couple of fantastic humans who are dedicated to the recruitment and the management of those panels across research, and we share them with marketing, we share them with a lot of other places. So managing that across everything, across our experiments, so that we always sort of know who's been hit and who's available. Yeah, I think it might be less about the tools and more about the person who's dedicated to that makes it work. I'm not sure that I would actually recommend that tool. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Another
you.
question.
Hi, thank you. It's great to have you guys here at JPMorgan Chase. Quick question. From your perspective, for people that do digital delivery with the whole agility transformation, is it easier or harder to scale UX research?
Oh gosh, so we're really in the thick of this right now. In fact, I just put together, we're working on our kind of like lean UX, lean discovery. How do we do this? How do we convince product managers that learning is increment? And so I think in a lot of ways they're a natural fit because it's a moment where you're changing the way that you think about how you work and you're changing the way you think about how you define success. And so it's a really natural moment to weave research and experimentation into the process, right? I think the thing that can be difficult is it's also typically a moment of stress because people are being asked to work in a different way, to change the way they think about how they define success. So they are vulnerable and they tend to fall back on habits that may not be the most useful. So I think making things really safe and making things very trusting is really critical, right? Because a researcher isn't going to want to share work in progress or insights in flight with a team that's going to seize on it and then not trust the researcher when they say, hey, I learned something new, things are different now, right? That requires trust on both sides, trust in the expertise and trust in the safety of that space. So I think for me, there's no real secret or sort of like this is how you weave the process in, but I actually think that trust, openness, willingness to accept the expertise of the other and be open to trying new things is the most important thing when you're trying to transform into a more agile, experimental way of working. That's what I've found in the last year or so.
Yeah, I totally agree with that actually. Like we're in this situation where we're trying to be more agile, from the body of knowledge that we've gathered, we're throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks and then taking that to product, together with product, kind of molding it out a little bit more. But then the business, like the financial side of the business, wants to size it for technology at that point. And it's like, well, no. Or go ahead, but it's going to be wrong. And we can pretty much guarantee it's going to be wrong. So I think, different maturity levels of different parts of the organization kind of can hinder that.
Can I also add one more thing that I think is really important? Is the comfort, sort of like a strong level of facility or comfort with the approaches and the methods, because one of the things about working in a more agile way is that you need to be able to adapt your process and your craft to the rhythm that you're working into the situation, right? So it's like, what would you do if you had a month? What would you do if you had a week? What would you do if you had a day? And you have to be comfortable enough as a researcher to be able to answer those questions confidently. And so I do think as we look at like sort of our talent architecture, one of the things we're thinking about is where are those gaps? We have some tribes who are incredibly strong in research because they've historically been staffed with researchers as UX leads. We have others where that is not the case. And so those have like a bigger gap in terms of being able to do lean discovery because they're just not as comfortable playing fast and loose with the methods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I one more add. Oh, I was going to say, also with Agile, they're always prioritizing the backlog, usually the teams. So if you can make your usability findings or any of your research findings say like, here's most critical, this is a showstopper, this is a nice to have or save for later. If you can use whatever severity scale they're using, they will probably put your findings into their backlog and they will translate it. So I think that works too.
Yeah.
Right, so I'm not speaking specifically towards agile or not agile, but in the environment that we are where it's very much focused on delivery of product, and that's what product managers are looking for is the product being delivered, that's what they're being measured on. Almost all the research we're doing has to be actionable. You have to show the value they add you're doing, otherwise it's, well, how are you helping me? I can build this already. They can understand very much when people are wireframing or building prototypes as something tangible. It's very hard to sell the tangibility of the user research. And so that's where the focus has to be. You have to talk about how are you bringing value? How can this be applied? How is this going to change what it is that's being designed? Yeah. So it's not so much about agile in particular, but it's just being very tangible about what the value you're bringing.
There was a question over there. Just
question right behind. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking care of me, Michelle.
Closer.
My name is Katya. I am the lead of UX research at BrainPop, which is an educational startup. I guess we're not a startup anymore. We're a small company. I mean, and we make tools for teachers and students to use in their classrooms. I'm also hiring. I do have a question. I've been working on scaling user research with designers, with product people, and the workshop-y, like learn how to interview, learn how to not ask leading questions, that's great and people like it. And even learning how to do analysis is pretty fun. They're like, oh yeah, we can, write up our insights on the wall and use sticky notes, and it was great. And then they go out and they do it, and then they find they have pages and pages of notes, and they're like, wow, this is way too much for me to analyze. I'm just going to write a research request for the UX research team. So we did the data collection, but you guys really need to do the analysis because we don't have time. So I'm pushing back on that, but I'm finding that these teams that are really excited about doing research, they're actually really excited about doing interviews or writing surveys. And then when they get a ton of data, they're not really excited about going through data because that's the hard part. So how do you get them excited about doing that and make the process of analysis go faster so it fits in their schedule?
And one hint to doing that is to sort of make them go backwards. Sort of ask them first, what are the results they're looking for? What are the hypotheses they're trying to understand? Because you shouldn't be collecting data unless you know how you're going to report on it. So sort of going backwards is a way of forcing them to say, yes, you could ask 35 questions and you're going to get tons of data, but in fact, how are you going to use that data? So forcing them to go backwards is one way of narrowing the scope in a way and making it more manageable. Do you have 5 questions that you're going to have answers to? And how are you going to take, so they should be able to very quickly be able to, after a session, be able to say, well, did this prove or disprove? Did this support the 5 questions I had going into the session as a way of getting the answers quicker?
Yeah.
And I think Megan and you, Michelle, or Dana was talking about debrief in the moment, not wait until you finish all your notes. So can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Sure. I think as we're coming out of research sessions, having the conversation right there so that we can actually talk about what we found and kind of bubble up some of those top line insights. I like to share whatever we have learned and whatever we know, whatever we are getting out of it in the moment the same day as research, because people are kind of, everyone knows that research is going on. It's on their minds and they're ready to hear about that. So I try to share those top line items in Slack on that day. I think analysis does come in different layers, right? So when you know what questions you are asking and what you're trying to answer, being able to pull those out of your notes is actually not that time consuming to just go through and say, these are the 5 things. What signal did I get on these 5 different things? And that's sort of round 1. Round 2 of analysis is truly a much deeper and thicker effort. And actually, I will do that on behalf of my teams. We're in all of the research stuff together. We plan it together. We think of it together. Somebody's running it, but and I'm usually doing interviews. And one of the designers, I work with a designer who has the best interview note-taking skills of anyone I've ever met in my career. Bless her. But from her notes, we'll run through and do the top line and share that out, and then I'll actually take those and do a deeper dive. But the deeper dive is much less kind of in the moment what the product team is desperate for in that sprint, and much more about real research.
Yeah, and I think Megan, in McKinsey, you do at least a pair of people doing the interviews or the research. Because when you're doing it solo, much more complicated and much more overwhelming.
And we have right there in our interview or whatever kind of research you're doing, if you're talking to people, Along, you have your notes, which is like actually what the person said, which is a big teaching moment for a lot of PMs. Not what you thought they said, what they said. And then on the right, the insight or the aha moments that you're having as you go through. And we put it in a place where everyone can edit it at once. So if you have 3 people in the interview, they can actually all take notes simultaneously. And then at the bottom of the template, okay, what are the 3 key takeaways from this interview, or 5, or however many you want, of course, but at least 3 that are meaningful. And how does this, evolve or change our understanding from our last piece of research, our last interview, whatever it was, so that it's a lot easier to go back and say, okay, what's the so what of what we did this week? Another thing, I think focus is really critical. So what we've been encouraging teams to do in Lean is actually, what's the most valuable question for this week or this sprint? And when you get to the end of the sprint, have you answered that question or have you not? Do you need to do another sprint on it? So it's really relentless focus and not just kind of talking to people.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Another question. There's another person here, and then the one in the back.
My question kind of follows up on this a little bit with Dana. I know before you mentioned with the speed dating, you kind of mentioned that like after you run the tests, let's say there's 6 of them in those 2 hours, you meet with the team. You said the team. Is it that you meet individually with each of those 6 teams, or is any researcher meeting with them, or who's actually meeting? And
right. So our researchers are embedded with product teams, so I'm embedded with 2 product teams. So if they're both participating, then we just figured out how to schedule that. But we'll gather with everybody who has time. It's always me and the designer, and usually the product manager. And then anyone else who is attending, we'll try and get them to come, and then just start calling out and whiteboarding what stood out for us, what was interesting, what did we learn, what did we gain confidence in.
All 6 of those groups together?
No, each product team separately.
Yeah, each product team separately, yeah. Sometimes we will gather together because we're doing things that cross over, right? And we're desperate to know what the other one is doing. But yeah, it is the individual product team will gather and do that synthesis.
Does it ever happen that there isn't a researcher present, or that you don't do a double check or look over?
Yes, yeah, I have, yes. And actually, there are some times when if I have 2 teams doing it, I actually need to focus on one and be there and help out because maybe, I invented the stuff that we're doing, right? And so the other team will kind of be operating on its own, but we'll check in. I think Etsy is unique in that, Etsy is a small company. It's only about 1,000 people, but the designers operate at a very high level like you see in a lot of larger internet companies, so they're very strategic. So it's a different way of interacting, I think.
That's great. Thank you. And what you can see from the previous question and this one is that we're seeing a trend, and the more people are involved, the better it is for everyone, not just for the researcher, for everyone involved in the work. The gentleman in the back, thank you.
Yes, hello. My name is Roland Dubois. I'm working as a lead UX product designer for a startup that does data visualization. One very important question, especially for the branch that my company is in, there's a lot of government funding and ADA compliance, and obviously there's more and more happening in that space, especially for software. It's online. Etsy, I imagine, has received certainly some letters at some point about ADA compliance, and that's like a normal thing. We know the Domino's case and all this kind of stuff. So my question is, and I can tell you what I'm strategically doing, but we're also a small team. So my question is, how do you account for accessibility research in your research kind of strategy? As we know, it's like 30 to 40% of humans in the US that have some kind of disabilities, and you have to account for that. At what point do you do research with them? Do you do them at wireframe level, or do you do them as last layer for visual contrast and whatever, color contrast and like screen readability? So what we do right now is basically like engage ourselves in accessibility meetups and hackathons, and indirectly work with people in that kind of space to understand and empathize. But for large scale and scalable research, getting people with accessibility concerns to test your software at the same time, I want to know what your companies do in order to do that kind of regularly and often.
Thank you.
We do accessibility testing once a quarter. We partner with relevant associations, so the Lighthouse, for example, for vision impaired, and we have training for our researchers on how to work with people who have disabilities. And honestly, we don't do enough. But we have controls in place to ensure that, for example, like, all of the text is there for all of the images that we have just before we roll out. And we do most of our testing on fully high fidelity prototypes. So we're not doing the best, but we're doing the best we can.
Sort of to add to that one, it's not directly on the user research side, but on the JP Morgan side, we've been building a pretty extensive design toolkit. So the building blocks for design, and each one of those building blocks or components, if you wish, has been run through by ADA compliance to make sure it's ADA compliant. I think some number like 80% of the components at the moment in the design toolkit are ADA compliant. That doesn't necessarily mean that when they're put together into an interface, it stays ADA compliant, but at least it gets us some parts of the way there.
Yeah, we're also doing that where our components are trying to meet the WCAG guidelines or whatever's appropriate. In the past, I've also worked with like a specialty group where they recruited the users, and the tip was you don't change the test. I think Whitney Quisenberry is good at this. Like you still have the same test. You're just saying, can they use it with the assistive device? So whether it's a mouth stick or a screen reader or something like that. So I think like that's the other key point that was critical to get across. So.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Other questions? Don't be shy. Oh, okay.
Joseph, you were mentioning some of the templates and playbook ideas, and I thought that was really cool. I think we didn't get to the last two. Last one.
She was
paying attention. Joseph loves that you counted.
So two of the ways we've tried to do is training, which is something which I think came up from a number of us, but we're looking at training in sort of the very small chunks. So we're looking at developing hour-and-a-half training modules around specific areas which we think will have value. So for example, we saw lots of people putting out surveys of different types, and the questions weren't the greatest. So we don't expect to be the ones that are going to create every survey. There's no way I could do that. We don't have enough people in the team to be able to do that. But instead, we're in the middle of developing a survey training module, which we're hoping is going to be an hour and a half, to sort of walk people through some of the gotchas around creating surveys and putting as well a bank of questions up that people can choose from. So if you're looking for questions around satisfaction, well, here's a bunch of different questions you could use, and they're safe, and you don't have to worry about anything else. So developing training was one thing we were talking about, and we're doing it on a couple of things. And some of them are not maybe what you'd think of in user research, but one which we think is an incredible need in our space is a problem definition one. We find lots of people coming to us with solutions. We need a dashboard. It's one of the favorite ones.
Yeah.
And then we want to do a problem definition. Well, why do you need a dashboard? Sort of a training of the 5 whys, or how might we, those kind of methods, but put it into a training module and be able to train product managers about how to do this better. The other one, which I don't think has come up at all really, is about tools. And so that's the other place where we're trying to bring more tools in, which can bring help. Now, bringing a tool into a bank is a very difficult task, as all of us who've worked in banks know. It's about a 2-year on average process to get it through the security, et cetera, et cetera. But getting a tool for testing, a good tool for testing, which lets you scale to test more people more rapidly, doing remote testing, is one of the ways. But even some of the less obvious tools. So for example, Jose, who's one who helps me get tools into the bank, recently brought us a way of being able to get transcriptions turned around. And it's incredible what you can do nowadays. I remember back in the day when we had to go to a transcription service and it was a big deal and the turnaround was a couple of days. There's a service we managed to bring in which has on the internet, you upload it, they have people who pick it up in pieces and they can turn it around in a matter of hours in one of, I don't know, 60 languages. And when you get it back, the transcript, you can actually, it goes through the transcript and you can move it. So those kind of tools we're trying to bring in to again, increase the leverage that we have across the company.
That's great examples. Thank you. Another question. Anne in the back, and then the lady in the front.
Hi, my name is Anne. I work with Jose and Joseph, but full disclosure, I used to work at McKinsey. And I have a question for Megan. So just on the topic of scaling research, your clients are basically internal clients, but they are externally facing. So I wanted to understand, just from taking them through the experience and interviewing them, have you heard if they are actually using some of the same techniques with their own clients?
Oh, such a good question. Yes. So the playbook that I mentioned, as our design practice has grown, it is actually being used in client engagements as well as internally. So our techniques, our approaches, our templates, our tools are making their way. We're actually, one of our aspirations, which is a little ways off, is to create a version of that could actually be client safe, like shareable with clients for them to use in their own organizations, like a little bit of like a manual kind of thing. It is not in that shape right now. But we also, one of the things we actually did with the regional technology councils is every time I did an activity with them, I would explain why we were doing the activity, how to do it, if they wanted to apply it in their own context, here's what you need. So we did like a body storming exercise and we did it. And then I was like, here's why we just did that. Here's how you could do this yourselves. And we actually had a bunch of people go off and do it in client settings. So we do try to look for opportunities to kind of change the way that the firm works, and to be, we now have 5 problem-solving methods that are accepted at the firm, and one of them is design thinking, or I believe we call it design-led, and so that is, that's been really huge for us, and so we have been trying to kind of sneakily get that out into the organization in a variety of ways, yeah.
I like that sneaky approach to raising the IQ on research and design of the organization. Yeah. So that's pretty good. Thank you. The person in front of you. Thank you.
Hi, Miranda, Design Research Ops. Joseph, you had mentioned tools. And going along with that, my question is to the panel, what is your favorite tool in your research tool belt that has enabled you to efficiently and effectively scale?
Michelle?
Actually, right now it's Miro, which used to be real-time board, because we've been able to put like journey maps and some basics out there. And actually doing that for the US, we were able to easily send it to our colleagues in EMEA, and they're commenting and letting us know what's the same or different. So Miro's been awesome. And then another plug for Airtable has just been super helpful.
And for us, it's user Zoom for usability testing. And that's an incredible step forward. We're not fully yet onboarded. We've tried it out. But having a tool like that in place, which lets us do remote testing at scale, was going to absolutely be a game changer for us.
User testing, which is actually very much the same, yeah, but just different companies. So, yeah, being able to have users run through prototypes or run through scenarios is hugely helpful. Those platforms are always made so that the folks who are participating are coached nicely in how to think aloud and talk about what they're doing. So you get some beautiful video clips of that show problems or show solutions right in the tool.
I think for us it's Optimal Workshop. We use I think it's called Reframer tool, and it's really allowed us to go beyond the individual study and code across many studies with the same set of people. When you have, when you're able to only interview 8 people for a study, it's huge. It's really allowed us to consolidate so much more of our research than we would have otherwise.
Yeah. I think for us, I was going to say Miro as well. So for us, it's really enabled our researchers to create artifacts really, really quickly, even if they aren't designers by trade. So we have some people who have great design chops who are researchers, and vice versa. But a lot of our researchers are, you know, like nerdy people coming out of academia who are much more comfortable in Excel or a vertical. And so giving them the ability to quickly create a journey map that's actually attractive, that is understandable, and that can be iterated on quickly has been huge for us. So the sort of enabling them to visualize their synthesis is huge.
And I think the other advantage of Mural or Miro, which is the other tool, is that it opens up the toolbox. Once again, it opens
Very
up the sandbox
Yeah.
to others, which
Yep.
many of our tools like Adobe Photoshop or even Sketch is closed versus an open place where we can all play. Okay, who wants the last question? You, go ahead.
So, hi, thank you so much. I'm Sarah. Segue to the question that was just asked is how do you demonstrate value with your findings and insights? Can you share some success stories, some maybe tools or presentation techniques that have been really great, especially in scaling research across your businesses and teams?
So interesting, at a different scale, it was actually showing where the funding was being spent and being able to show executives where programs should be killed was one of the largest success factors. So this wasn't about a particular insight, but it was, we have this insight which we learned about, and they all said, yeah, we knew that already before you started. He said, yeah, but look at where you're funding. Look at how your funding doesn't reflect what you say you know. And so being able to say that and actually shut down programs was where we had the most effect.
That's great.
Success,
okay, a quick success story by each one of you. And
Okay, so really quick, one of the things that we've done in the last year is convince the organization that our quantitative analysts and data scientists should live in the same group as our qualitative user researchers. So that's why I have a new job. And we used our own business value of design report to make the argument, so thank you. But what we've been able to show really quickly, it's only been about 6 months, and we've done a couple of mixed method studies with an analyst and a researcher on it that have actually realized immense value because they've been focused on increasing adoption among key groups within the firm of technologies in which we've already invested and that we chose for really good supported reasons, but where we've had some challenges kind of getting them into the culture and into the process. And we've been able to do some mixed method work there to really segment our users with a real analytical rigor and to identify triggers and behavior changes and test those really quickly. And that has already sort of increased the investment or the return on investment for those products. And also, I can't say exactly what the situation is, but those behavior changes also really help with security and client confidentiality. So there's like exponentially helpful things there. So for us, that's been one great way that we've been able to say, trust us, you really should do these two things together. There's a huge benefit to it. It's expensive, but worth it. And then be able to show that really, really quickly.
Natalie?
I think one big success story for us was we used to kind of do generative research and then come up with insight slides, and we would have like one insight per slide and try and communicate it that way. And they often were misunderstood down the line. You know, people caught on to one and forgot about the others. And so one of the things that we attempted to do last year was, or the year before even, was to kind of create a vision, a strategic vision using narrative design and storyboarding. And it actually landed so well because it was so actionable. People could see like, oh, we can do this here, we can do this there. It was really like a visual, how might we? And the character in that was called Chloe, and it became like a verb. So we had like product people come to us and say, I want a Chloe too. Can you do a Chloe for us? How long will it take to do a Chloe? I want a Chloe. So we felt that was successful.
That's great.
Fantastic.
And so wait, the question is on success stories in terms
one
of
quick
sort of
success story.
connecting research to insights. Okay,
Yeah.
so we do very, very quick research. So we're cruising through research every sprint. There are multiple studies going on. And I think in coming up to one of our rollouts, which is happening right now, we had a couple of questions that we explored first through one of these, one of the speed dating style research items, and then built that out with additional questions that kind of came up in that through a card sort and a set of interviews and some user testing. And we did those nice and rapidly, and the insights and the coordination across those kind of built up into very specific changes that we needed to make to the app. But the teams move very quickly, so a couple of, a month before rollout, we're still able to actually make changes and move along like that. And I think the speed of those rolling efforts is what brought
That's impressive.
The success.
Michelle?
So our most recent success was actually showing evidence. We were showing essentially like materials and processes that kind of our end users, again, brokers and their teams might be using, and being able to surface that, have some videos, have like these end materials, have people go, oh my God, these are all the tools they're using. I have a nice screenshot of them using Internet Explorer or something, and bookmarks, and just like saying like, here's really the reality. So I feel like some of the basics, like don't throw that out. That helped us like say, okay, we need to fix this, and it helped us get funding for the next phase, essentially. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much for this open discussion, and thank you for the audience.
Thank you, Jose, for organizing this and making it happen. Before people disappear into the bar and food and stuff, what time do people have to leave?
8:30 we wrap up.
All right, so you got 20 minutes to gorge yourselves. I just wanted to close and let people know tickets are still available for the Design Ops Summit, which is here in New York and Brooklyn at the end of the month. The 23rd, 24th are the conference days, and then the 25th is the workshop day. And a couple of the workshops are already sold out, but there's still tickets for some of the others. I think you can even buy tickets by day on the 2 days now, first day or second day. So I encourage people to go to that event if you are design ops curious. And I also wanted to give people a chance to raise your hand if you are hiring. High, so others can see it. Otherwise, it doesn't help. All right. So there's people hiring besides these people, too, that are also here to do that. Just wanted to give a chance for non-speakers to let people know that they're hiring. Otherwise, we are looking for specifically for the next 2 months places and content. So please do speak to Michelle or I, or message us on the Meetup app, the Meetup site, if you think you have either of those things. So otherwise, thank you for coming. Get home safely. And for those who celebrate, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays.
Thank you.